Welcome to the Ironman Insider Podcast, presented by Morton. I'm your host, Matt Lieto. On this podcast, we have the great opportunity to chat with some of the fastest and most inspirational athletes in the sport that are redefining what is possible. And well, today, our guest is a perfect example of that for us. Matthew Marquardt is a rising star in professional triathlon and a full-time medical student. Former collegiate swimmer at Princeton, he discovered triathlon in 2021 and quickly began his incredible journey in the sport. Since turning pro, he has absolutely stacked major podiums at Ironman races, including fourth place in the Ironman Pro Series last year. And he's coming off an incredible debut win, come from behind debut win at the Cairns Airport Ironman Cairns just this last week. And, to me, he is an inspiration balancing elite sport and medical school, but he also channels his efforts into cancer awareness, inspired by personal loss. He's a driven, disciplined, and deeply motivated athlete, and continues to show us what the sport's all about. What's going on, Matthew?
Not too much. Just nice to be back in Ohio for a little bit.
I know, right? You've been traveling just a little bit.
Yeah, no, been all over the place the last couple of months, and so um, it's nice to kind of be home for a little bit of block of time before Lake Placid.
So Placid's next one on the list, huh?
Placid's the next one on the list. It's just kind of that was always the plan, and Placid is almost like it's a 15-hour drive for me, but it's basically like a hometown race. I feel like because I've done it, this will be my third time doing it, and there's always a lot of like friends and family that are racing it as well. So it's nice to kind of see a lot of people and just kind of love that course and the the vibes and the energy have always been good, as they say. So I'm looking forward to going back and was really happy that I was able to add cans to get another opportunity to race. And the timing is kind of just on the border of doable. Do
Right.
two Ironmans about 5 weeks away is, kind of just, as I said, just on the border of doable. I think if you do things closer than that, it's most likely not going to end well, just because you can't fully recover and kind of build back up to the next one. But it's, having 6 to 8 weeks between Ironman races is a little bit more preferred, but you can't have everything the way you want it, I guess.
No, you can't always do that, especially if you're kind of chasing things. And last year, you were super close to bring that one home. Is that part of the motivation to get back out there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think there's two motivations. Is that, one is that we have this kind of spasm problem that we're still working through, and at the beginning of the year, the two kind of main goals and focus is the Ironman Pro Series and then also the Ironman World Championships. And with Ironman Texas and 70.3 St. George kind of not going super well because of the spasms, you know, I think, I still very much want to do really well on the Pro Series, but also you need to be really careful because if you start chasing the Pro Series, that's just you risk kind of spiraling downwards in a not good way. So that's kind of why, if Cairns had been 1 week later, I think we probably would not have done it. Just
Right.
because like the focus was always on Lake Placid and Nice. And if, you kind of, as I said, if you stack things too closely, it can end up just having a negative spiral. So, Cairns, I think, definitely brought me back into the picture, hopefully, with the Pro Series, but obviously it's a long season and a lot can still happen. So there's no guarantees, but it's given hope to that goal again. And then, uh, we still haven't fully figured out this spasm problem. I do think we're making progress, but Lake Placid will provide one more opportunity um, to kind of test it out in a race environment before Nice, because obviously, if that happens in Nice, it will be very, very, very hard to make up 8 minutes that you lose right off the start. So,
No, yeah, that's not something that you can really any normal person can give up in any professional Ironman race and have a chance of winning. But obviously, you proved that wrong this weekend. But for those that don't understand or haven't seen what you've gone through this year, let's talk a little bit about the spasms. I know I saw them, I I think for the first time that you experienced them last year firsthand, just a few hundred meters out of transition in Topah, look like, was it your hamstrings, your quads both kind of locked up on the bike early?
Yeah, so so it's happened 4 times now. First time was at Topah, which is obviously really rough because I was going into that race and was in contention for the overall title for the Pro Series, and was still able to kind of manage fourth in the end, which is obviously a lot better than what it could have been if I didn't finish the race at all. But it
Sure.
was definitely really hard to kind of lose on the ability to lose out on the opportunity to kind of really race head to head with Barnaby for the title. But yeah, so like what happens is it's always the front of my quads, pretty much just in the quads, and it's really kind of in the distribution of specific nerves for those quads. And so we've pretty much narrowed it down on in terms of it's a problem with what's called the femoral nerve, which is the main nerve that controls the muscles in the front part of your leg and in your quads. And given that it's always happened right after the swim, like I'm telling you, like
Yeah.
it's within like step one to within 5 minutes of starting the bike. It's clear that the swim is kind of the precipitating factor, and so now really I think our next step is, okay, what are the things that we can do on the swim to kind of hopefully alleviate that from potentially like increasing strength to mobility, just to kind of loosen up that area. So we'll see. I think, before Lake Placid, we'll do a lot more open water swimming as well. Now that it's getting warmer out. And so hopefully that will enable us to test it before the race as well. But, sometimes
Yeah.
you only know if you fixed it or not when it comes time to race.
Dude, it's so brutal. It's so brutal. And any athlete that struggled with cramps knows how brutal that is. And not to bring myself too much into this, but in my career for a long period of time, I had these catastrophic hamstring cramps that would happen at the exactly what you're saying. As soon as you get out of the water and you're like, training all these hours to have that swim where you want it to be, you do everything you need to on race day. And then it's hard because the cramps are obviously the big thing. And you're like, oh, well, I guess I'll stand here and wait till they go. But it's also mentally that whole swim, you're like, I hope those first couple steps I don't
Yeah.
cramp, right? Like, how brutal is that? Like, trying to, let all that work that you've done to, help that problem, like, be real and have an effect, but also, like, not let your mind, like, precipitate what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, the first like 2 to 3 times, the first 2 times in particular that it happened, it was pretty like devastating from a mental standpoint of like,
Yeah.
like the race is over. Like obviously, like I still kept forward and I still finished, but like, you know, much, I think much, there was much more like negative emotions that came with it. Whereas now, I don't know, I kind of feel like almost like the fate is in the hands of the triathlon gods, if you want to say that. And so like I've done everything that I can, like before Cairns in particular, I was like, I've done everything that I can to try and mitigate this. And at the end of the day, I feel like it's a little bit of kind of like roulette, and like we're just gonna see what happens. And if I pull the cramp card and that's what I get, then that's what I get, and I'm just gonna have to adapt and do the rest of the race kind of like from behind. And so I guess that's the only benefit of it happening multiple times is that like now it's like, okay, well, it's like, all right, well, this is the path that I'm taking today, and we're gonna switch to this game plan. And that's, obviously very much what we did. Um, so it obviously certainly sucks, but it's kind of more of like a, well, here we go again,
Right.
type of a thing, and then you move forward. So
And I know you're very analytical and your coach is analytical and you're trying to figure out different ways to work on this. Has there been thought, like, do we think the effort in the swim is any of that? Like, is there a thought to, like, hey, maybe I'll just swim second group and swim catch up and then I don't have to stand in transition? And obviously a competitive athlete,
yeah,
like, you don't want to do that. Like, that's not what you want to
right.
do, but
Yeah, no, I certainly think that that's a an approach that will be explored before Lake Placid is like
yeah.
maybe not necessarily like try and swim second group, but like, swim first group, and then is there something that I can do on the last 5 minutes of the swim or right at the end of the swim where maybe I'll lose 30 seconds or a minute.
Right.
But obviously that's a lot better than losing 10 minutes or 30 minutes. So Obviously, we would prefer to not even do that and just be able to race the way I used to be able to race. But if that's what's required, at least in the interim, then that's what we'll do. So we'll just kind of have to make that decision a little closer to the race day.
That's awesome. Well, no doubt you guys are doing the right things, and but it's still, man. Let's talk through. We got to talk through Cairns because that was like insane,
Mhm,
and I was lucky enough to be doing the commentary on that race, and when you went through transition, obviously you were in that lead group
mhm.
with Riddle and Amberger, and then kind of out of transition, we're like not even out of transition. We're like,
We're like,
Marquardt's
where did
nowhere. Where'd the guy go? And maybe first tell us, like, is Jamie? He's ridiculous in the start from the beach. Like, was it crazy how much of a gap he had within like 20 meters of that swim?
Yeah, yeah. I think he really showed kind of his Olympic distance ITU speed, and kind of getting out really fast. But, at the same time, I think, there's, as someone who's done a lot of Ironmans and stuff, and who's also like has a competitive swimming background, there's a little bit of like, okay, it's
Yeah,
a 15-minute swim. Let's
totally.
just be patient. And so it was definitely very impressive how quickly he got out, but also at the same time, like, you know, I've done a couple of these and I kind of know what's doable. And I didn't think that a 40-minute swim was probably going to be realistic. So I just
That's
let him
awesome.
go.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. But obviously, it seemed like you and Amberger kind of worked together to bring that back and look comfortable. And obviously, he got a little bit of a gap coming. Taking maybe a better line, a left line going into T1. But yeah, talk us through like your head when you're hitting the beach and those cramps are happening. Like, how did that walk us through that period of time?
Yeah, so hit the beach, and I knew kind of going in that like I was exactly in the position that I wanted to be. I was kind of hoping that it would be a group of me, Riddle, and Amberger, kind of coming out of the water together. And so I was super happy with how the swim went. And the first, I don't know, the first 50 steps or so was fine. And then basically I got into the change tent and took the wetsuit off, and then like kind of a couple steps after that, that's when it started to happen. And it was like, oh, okay, like let's try and shuffle a little bit, make it not worse. And then it got to the point where like I literally just had to stop and was like waddling, as everyone saw on the broadcast, to get to my bike. And when I finally, because what I knew is I knew that I needed to get on the bike because I knew that I
Right.
needed to start spinning the legs, getting the blood flowing a little bit, and just letting the muscles slowly release. And so, it's one of those things where I've actually found that for me, it's best to just get some movement in rather than like fully stopping and, then moving. So, my focus was like, okay, I just need to get to my bike. And then even when I did get to my bike, it was like I quite literally had to pick my right leg up with my hands and move it over the bike because I
Brutal.
like everything was just so seized. And then I screamed a lot for the first like 10 minutes or so of the bike. Um,
Which
and then
helps.
think,
It helps.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, people were passing me, and then after about, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes, things started to loosen up. And so then I was like, okay, I'm gonna give myself another 15 minutes and slowly build up to like my target power. And then pretty much 30 minutes or so into the bike, I was pretty much hitting power around the power that I wanted to hit. And I think like a really important part about the bike was that there was a really strong headwind coming back towards
Hmm.
Palm Cove and back towards town. So on the way out, you kind of have a little bit of a tailwind, and then on the way back, you have a headwind, and then you do that loop again, and then you go all the way down into town. And so, at the first turnaround, I saw that I was, I don't know, like 6-ish minutes behind the lead, 6 to 7 minutes behind the lead. And I was like, okay, like I'm still in this. But also it's really early in the bike. And so I didn't really want to try and make up that time then because
Hmm.
everyone can ride really well at the start of an Ironman. And so it was more about damage control. And then the second loop kind of, I saw that I'd started to pick up a little bit of time, maybe pulled back a minute or two. Um, And really that last 65K where it was all headwind into town, that was when I mentally was like, okay, this is my time to make my move. And to try and really put some time on people. And thankfully I was able to do that. And pretty happy to come into town in third place. And then it was like, okay, then there's the next question of, okay, what's going to happen on the run? Am
Right.
I going to be able to run the way that I know that I can run, or is there going to be consequences from the spasms earlier on? And thankfully things were flowing really, really well, um, and was really comfortable. And so I just wanted to kind of relax on the first lap, which I did. And then second lap was, still pretty relaxed, but started to, I guess, at least mentally put a little pressure on. And by the end of the second lap, it became clear that Nick was starting to hurt a little bit. And so I was like, okay, third lap is when you make your move. And so that's really when my goal was to catch him was on the third lap. And so that it would be harder, so that
Yep.
I'd have time to kind of build a little bit of a lead into the finish. And thankfully was able to catch him like near the end of the third lap. And then the fourth lap is just whatever you have left, and get to the finish line. And those last 10 to 15 minutes were really tough. Definitely felt like, it was about to give out. But made it across the line. So
Dude, you were punishing yourself for sure. Like the face that you were pulling, there was no doubt that you were giving it your all. And to me, that's one of the more impressive things about that race is, yeah, like I've had some experience with cramping in different zones, and generally out of that swim, if you're having that issue, you're like, okay, this is kind of when this happens.
Mhm,
But it's still like in the back, like it's still in the
mhm,
back of your head. Like, no, my body wants to seize at some point. And so for you to
mhm.
like make that pass for the win and still be on the throttle and just punish yourself as much as you can, like to me was pretty impressive. Like, how are you still thinking, oh, I might lock up again when you're pushing that hard, or you're able to let that go?
I would say that for the most part, I was able to let it go. I think it's really important to like, there's obviously this balance of having awareness of what's happening to your body, when you're digging deep, as well as ignoring what's happening to your body.
Right.
And I like to think that I have a pretty good, like, I'm able to kind of toy that line like pretty well, because like obviously if you push too hard then you blow up, but at the same time you kind of want to ignore some of the pain that you're going through, in order to be able to really hit your peak performance. So um it was something that I was monitoring but not thinking about overly, is what I would say.
Right. Awesome. And yeah, dude, like it was fun to be able to watch you early in the bike. I mean, not fun, obviously. I was
Yeah,
like hurting for you, obviously. Like all
right.
these travel, like we know what it's like to, as an athlete.
Yeah.
You're kind of gambling as a professional
Hmm.
athlete, right? Like you're putting this money out, you're going to these places, you're putting all this effort in, and then you're like, seriously, I'm standing still in transition. Like it's
Right.
brutal. And we had a camera back to be able to follow you as you made through it, and it was like kind of one of those stories, and we assumed it would be kind of like uh Topal. You're like, okay, this is a bummer. This is one of our pre-race favorites. We'll get a video of him like struggling. But
Right.
you could tell that you were not getting dropped by the guys that you were around. And you even made moves. I think I
Hmm.
saw you pass Hansen maybe
Hmm.
20K in or something like that. And you're like,
Hmm.
okay. And I'm like, okay, he's in that mindset now. And this I talk about this a lot with athletes I coach and kind of on the broadcast is that oftentimes we think the little gaps early matter.
Hmm.
And your gap wasn't that little, but it was still in the
Hmm.
grand scheme of Ironman, that's little. It's 8 minutes.
Right.
You
Right.
look at an Ironman when it's all said and done at the finish line the
Hmm.
next day. You're like, oh, I freaked out about losing a minute, and I
Hmm.
spent a couple matches, and I ended up, losing by 7 minutes or whatever. But it
Hmm.
seemed like you did have a plan that was, if
Hmm.
this happens, we just got to race it as if I'm a bad swimmer, kind
Yeah.
of, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the important things that I was telling myself, especially early on in that bike, is like, be patient, don't overdo it now. Because you're exactly right. Like, 30 seconds, you could spend all this effort to get back 30 seconds or 10 seconds earlier on in the bike. But if you save that until the last, and that could be the equivalent of like making up 3 minutes. Or, so like you just
100%.
you really it's a very, everyone always says it's a very long day. And so kind of I think that's one of the things that I was the most proud about with the performance overall is not overreacting, but kind of staying disciplined to the game plan, and to the backup plan, and just kind of, yeah, being disciplined and following through and being patient.
Yeah, that's rad. And I think that that course, uh, when the wind's how it was and how it often is,
Hmm.
it's kind of perfect to be able to do that plan. And not to take anything away
Yeah,
from you and your execution, but
yeah,
sometimes you want to have that plan in a race and then it's a gradual downhill with a tailwind the last 50 miles and it's
right,
like it's not going to do you any good. But and I think
right.
the way that race, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that race developed, the group really didn't stay together all that much. So it kind of, I imagine on your third lap or starting your way back when you were seeing the gaps, you're like, okay, I'm actually. At what point did you say I'm in a position to be able to win this race again?
I think that the moment where I really realized that, um I was doing well. I don't really
Right.
think, I think like the thought of winning didn't really come until like lap two of the run, honestly.
Okay.
Um,
Rad.
but like, the thought of like, oh, like I'm in this race, like I can podium, came really kind of, I don't know, maybe 40K to go on the bike when I caught there was a group of like three people with like Mike Phillips in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that he had been, call it a minute and a half to 3 minutes behind the lead for most of the day. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm back in this race. Like this is like I passed a good chunk of people, and like there's not that many more people up the road and I'm probably pretty close. So that was really the moment that was like, okay, like I'm in this and like I'm feeling good, and like, let's keep pushing, but again, don't overdo it on the
Yeah.
bike because there's still a run that needs to come. So yeah.
Dude, and all that, that's why you had a good bike split was your pacing. But dude, 2:39
Yeah.
marathon. That's pretty stinking good, man. Like that's your best marathon by a few minutes, yeah?
Hmm. Yeah. It's last year 2:45 was my fastest at Lake Placid, and like 2:43 was my fastest before that. So um it was really nice to see. It's one of those things where for a while now, like we've known that I could go sub 2:40. And like we've objectively seen improvements in my running over the past year and a half. Um, but like that hadn't happened in races for one reason or another. And so to finally be able to actually express that, on race day was really, really awesome.
Yeah, dude, that's huge. And it's crazy. I talked in the intro that you started in triathlon in 2021, turned pro in 2023. To be honest, you're like, and I think I've told you this before, and I love you, but you're one of those people that I want to hate because you're like good at everything, right? And
Yeah.
right away, like your first year, you podiumed at 3 Ironman races as a pro,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
kept it going. You had 2 podiums the next year, but
Yep.
and that's cool, and that's like it's great, and it was always like shocking and surprising, and showed what you have, your capabilities. But in that short period of time, to be able to continue to have races like that, results like that, but then you're showing that you have all the pieces to
Hmm.
be able to win a world championship, right? Like if you can run a 2:39 on a humid, like it's a flat course, it's a fast course, but man, it's hot out there. And like for you to prove that you have that, you obviously have the swim and the bike, like in 3 years while doing all the other things that you've done, you're, and you're seeing that you're showing all the pieces that it takes to maybe be able to win a world
Yeah.
championship one day.
Certainly, certainly. And I think that's like super exciting. And yeah, so I mean, but we'll see. We'll see if I can put it all together. That's obviously the big question. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And okay, so we've talked about that. And I can't say enough how impressive that race was, because you're also like Nick Thompson had the race of his career too, right?
Mhm.
Like, so
Yeah.
to be able to beat one of the better athletes in our sport as he's having one of his best days too, like it was a field that deserved respect, and you got it. So I
Hmm.
think impressed by that, and obviously moved up in the series. You third place now.
Yeah, in third place
Yeah.
now. So, but still a lot to go.
Frankfurt's coming, so that's gonna change things a
Yeah.
little bit. But you've got
Yeah.
enough races. Wait, what races do you have left on the calendar? Obviously, the World Championships.
Um, so definitely Worlds and Lake Placid, and then we'll have to decide if we're going to add another 70.3 or not. So
Sweet,
that's kind of a post Lake Placid decision.
awesome. So all that being said, on this like incredibly high performance side, is that we got to talk about all the other stuff, man. Because like we thought the cool story about Matthew at Cairns was going to be that he was on a cruise ship for a week, and he still had a good race. Like we thought that was going to be the storyline, and then you did what you did on the race day. But yeah, let's talk about that. Like clearly, you've had a goal of balancing this overachieving lifestyle that I'll call it, with all due respect, as a medical student, and doing all your research. Tell us a little bit about how triathlon fits into this world that you have, that is like very high performing, takes a lot of your attention, and it seems like anybody that I've known that tries to do a lot of things like that seems to slack in the personal relationship, family environment, and you don't at all. Like that seems to be like those the work and all the extracurricular, and is always, it seems like it's all behind family. Like tell us a little bit about how you
Mhm.
juggle all these things.
Yeah, great question. Um, where to start on it? I mean, I think one thing that I knew coming into both medical school and as well as starting triathlon is that both of them probably increase your risk for divorce, to be perfectly honest. Um, and so because of that, like, obviously no one wants to end up in a divorce. And so it's just been like, okay, it's very easy to kind of get fully sucked in and kind of lose out on the personal and the relationship side of things. And so, um, that was kind of always made it made has made me extra aware of it. And then also like my experiences in college with kind of swimming were that I was probably overcommitted to swimming a little bit, in that
Okay.
I wanted desperately more than anything else than to improve in swimming. And so because of that, I probably said no to some things that otherwise could have said yes with no consequences. So when I say that, I mean like on my off day, like I was like, I can't do anything. Like I'm just gonna like sit and study, and like I'm not gonna do anything active because it's my off day. Whereas like in reality, like I could have gone on a hike, or like gone and explored kind of New Jersey or New York or something like that. And so when I started triathlon, I really wanted to make sure that I didn't kind of become overcommitted to the sport again and kind of start really missing out on those other aspects of life. Because especially like when I started triathlon in 2021, there was I had no idea that I was going to get this good. I thought, like, well, originally I was just
Right.
going to do one race, and then one race became one season, and there was never really this grand plan of to get to where I am. And so because of that, like, I didn't really know how good I would become. And the last thing I wanted to do was to become super serious about this thing, but I'm like, a middle of the pack age group or a middle of the pack pro. And but I'm giving up all these other really phenomenal aspects of life. So that was a big part of it, of like, why from the beginning I was like, I want to make sure that I can still do other things and prioritize other things. And also at the end of the day, like, my career is to become a physician and to treat patients. And so that, like, triathlon is this really phenomenal thing that I'm doing kind of now, but it's not my entire life. And so
Right.
the last thing that I wanted is to like look back and say, oh, I missed out on all these other great opportunities because I was so focused on triathlon. And so anyways, that's kind of where the cruise comes in, where about a year ago, Sarah's family, decided they wanted to go on a cruise, celebrate her graduation and becoming a doctor, and also just have a great family trip. And I was invited to come with. And obviously, we knew even back then that the timing wasn't going to be the best. It would be right in the middle of the season, but I think sometimes in life you have to just say, okay, I'm going to do it and I'm going to figure out how to make it work when that time comes, which is honestly, truly kind of the story of the last 4 years for me, where like we'll just figure it out as we go.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so I committed to go on the trip. And originally, I mean, honestly, even until like after St. George, the plan was just to only run and maybe do some open water swims on the cruise. And then, kind of when the decision was made to do cans, it actually came from them that they were like, you should bring your bike. Like, if you're like, we want you to bring your bike on the cruise. And I was like, well, first off, I was like, okay, well, you don't have to tell me twice, but obviously that meant
Exactly.
a
You're like,
ton.
you're stoked that they brought it up, right?
Right, exactly. I was like wanted to make sure because again, like the last thing, like I don't want this great
Yeah.
vacation that's, about spending family time and celebrating, my girlfriend to all of a sudden become that this is a training trip for Matthew.
Right.
And so the fact that they were so supportive of me bringing the bike in the first place was meant a ton. And then, but even then, like on the cruise, like I still made sure that the workouts were done kind of on the periphery. So it was before we woke up in the morning, before we did like our activities for the day. And then, there's always kind of like a little downtime, kind of mid to late afternoon before dinner. And that's when I would do my other workout. And so really just kind of tried to make it as not a big deal as possible. But then they were obviously super supportive of it as well. Um, so yeah, so that
That's
I mean
great.
that was kind of the cruise. It's just like figuring out how to do it, and again like
And
with
is
the
it
swimming part, like I realized like, oh, I can use a bungee cord like 2 days before the cruise,
it's
and
so
so
ridiculous.
so yeah, so some of the stuff like you literally just figure out like in the moment.
That's amazing. And am I wrong that there's like the benefit of because one of the biggest challenges of training for an Ironman is consuming enough food. And like what I've always heard about cruises is like you eat all that you want. Like, I imagine that was kind of helpful.
Yeah, no, there certainly was like all you can eat, but also I think the thing that people don't realize is that like all of that food has a lot of fat in it. And
Right.
so it
Sure.
wasn't it wasn't quite as much abundance as you would expect, because like right after a workout you don't really want to have a cheeseburger. You
Right.
want to just have something that's more carb specific. But yeah, I mean certainly food was not necessarily a problem, but I think like one thing to touch on a little bit, like, I think like let's just talk about like the doping aspect of being on a cruise. And the reason why I bring this
Sure.
up is that like I had to tell USADA
Right.
like I'm gonna be in this
Totally.
port from this time, and then we're gonna go
Totally.
to this port and we're gonna be there. So they knew exactly where I was the whole time. But like even then, like when we did excursions on land, like I decided not to eat any of the food while I was on land because realistically, it would probably be fine. But like
Right.
some of the food protocols, especially with some of the meat, isn't necessarily the same as in the US in some of the countries that we went into. And so the last thing I would want is to obviously have a positive test because I ate a cheeseburger um, in, a different country. And again, realistically, probably wouldn't happen. But like again, I just wanted to kind of take every single, reduce any risk. So some of the days I didn't eat for like 8 hours or 9 hours.
No way. No way.
Yeah,
That's brutal. That's brutal. And yeah,
yeah.
I mean, good for you because it's also there's that risk. The risk is like kind of small,
Super small, super small.
but it's also like if it's the reason, it's also the excuse all that the people that actually dope use
Right,
as to why they
right,
got tested
right,
positive, right? So like it's a lose
right,
lose. Like there's no way you're getting out of that.
right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's and no man, yeah, that's I've filling in the doping whereabouts is never fun. Doing so on a cruise ship, I can't imagine it's that much fun.
Yeah, yeah, it was rough.
Dude, that's hilarious. And in the grand scheme of things, obviously it didn't seem to affect performance, but it wasn't that bad of a training week, except for 8 hours of not eating.
No. Yeah, except for the one or two times where I went a long time without eating. It was good. And I mean, honestly, like I think that there were some benefits in that we were in Central America and the Caribbean, and so it was really humid. Even when you're in air conditioning, like even when you're in the air conditioned gym, it's still
Yeah.
super humid. And so like it definitely got some kind of heat prep built in, which, added bonus.
And everything you're doing is within a few meters of where you're sleeping, right? So like
Right.
the logistics of being a professional triathlete and trying to train for it at home, if you're doing 3 a day, you add another hour and a half of logistics
Right.
to the
Yep.
day. And if you're, you got that time. So that's
Yep.
sweet.
Just walk up two floors, go to the pool or go to the gym and
Dude, I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, and for there are still some people that haven't heard all of your story, but tell us a little bit about what you're working on in medical school. Kind of, you spoke a little bit in Cairns after the finish line that you thought about dropping out. Craig Alexander said, I could tell that guy's never actually thinking about dropping out, but there's other inspiration and like other reasons for you to keep doing what you're doing. Can you talk us through a little bit of that?
yeah. Well, first I would say that like I had a fleeting thought of, well, a beach day sounds pretty nice. I did come all the way to Australia. I know it would be nice just to sit on the beach because we pretty much
Yeah,
turned around and came right back. So, but yeah, then
right.
that went pretty soon after that. But
That's awesome.
yeah, so like my when I kind of first started triathlon, ever it was really important to me that if, this was when I was still an age grouper. This was when there was no necessarily indication that like I would ever get to the spot that I was in. But I think it's important sometimes to at least have a guiding light or a North Star. And so for me, kind of when I started, I was like, I really want to get to a place one day where I'd be able to use my platform as an athlete to provide hope to cancer patients and survivors, and to bring awareness about the importance of cancer research and kind of the advances that we are doing in cancer care. And so that has kind of been my guiding light throughout all of kind of my triathlon career. And as a medical student, my goal is to become a head neck cancer surgeon one day.
Oh,
And so, like, because of that, I do a lot of research. I'm inherently very curious. And so I've spent extra time in it, I've made med school even longer to spend dedicated time focusing on a couple different projects. One of which is how can we use 3D printing technology to help surgeons in the operating room better remove tumors. And so for a lot of surgery, for a lot of cancers, the best indicator of long-term survival is going to be whether or not you remove the tumor fully from the patient um, during surgery. And what we can do is we have really cool technologies where we can take someone's MRI scan or their CT scan and turn that into a tangible 3D object that shows here's the healthy tissue, here's the tumor, and then the
oh wow,
surgeon can then use that in the operating room to make sure that they remove all of the
crazy.
tumor. And it's super cool stuff. And there's also like a really valuable patient education aspect of it, in that you can show them, like, this is what we just took out of you. Because obviously you can't hand them the physical tumor, but like
Right, right, right.
we can show them the model and say like, okay, this is why this is a really big surgery. We're going to take out half of your pelvis, or we're going to take out a big part of your jaw. Um, and just kind of help
Wow.
them understand like a little bit more about what's going on. And so yeah, so that's like one of the big projects. And then the other big
Nice.
project that I'm working on is a really cool connection between triathlon and medicine, in that surgeons have a lot of kind of crossover with triathletes, in that they need to perform at their peak condition, and sometimes their surgeries last 8 to 12 hours. A lot of them only last an hour or two, but some of them can go up to half a day long. And They obviously have very high stakes as well. And so my kind of thought was like, okay, what are the lessons that we can learn from triathlon, other elite sports in general, and then start transferring them to surgeons to really help them optimize their performance in the operating room. And so we're kind of in the process of going through the data we've collected from about 30 different surgeons. Um, a bunch of their biometric data while they're operating. So what their heart rate was like, what their sweat rate was like, what their glucose was
Wow.
like, and then also did a battery of different tests to kind of understand their performance, their cognitive performance during that surgery and how they were feeling and stuff. And so it'll take a really long time to get all of the data out because it was so much of it. But we're looking at like how can we use wearable devices or just
Yeah.
recovery techniques or things like that to improve surgeon performance. So it's been a really cool kind of translational aspect of my life.
Dude, that's huge. Those both of those are incredible projects, and like obviously the latter one will have use outside of just the cancer realm too. I imagine, right?
Mhm.
Like monitoring,
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
get ER and that first one, that's nuts. So you like literally the surgeon in the operating room will be like, "This is what I'm supposed to get out," and then when they get what tumor out that they did, they just kind of like side by side it and see if they
Yeah.
missed anything.
Yeah, so I mean, this is not like a tumor model, and I know this is mainly a podcast, but I'm going to show you. So
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
like an example of a 3D model. Has a slightly different use. This is a pediatric skull, so a kid's skull. And the purpose of this one is to help surgeons kind of understand, obviously, when you're doing surgery on a kid, it's much smaller spaces. But, similar thing, like we can here on the back of it, you can see this pink part right here. That's the pituitary gland. This yellow part is the optic nerve, so that's the nerves that control that like enable you to see. And then the
yeah.
red is kind of the main arteries in that area of the brain. And so you can like do the same thing, but then like say, oh, there's a tumor right here, you know,
Wow.
and we want to get that out. And so it just kind of helps them have some additional landmarks and the 3D visualization to make sure that they're really getting it all out. Because sometimes these tumors they crawl into different parts of your body. So it might start on your tongue, but then eventually grow and like crawl into your bone. And when it does that, in particular in the bone, like you could see on the surface, you could be like, I think that the tumor ends here, but the tumor has actually gone way further inside the bone and you can't even see it. But with
Right.
the 3D printing, we're able to kind of show, hey, look, no, the tumor actually goes all the way up to here, and so you should cut a little higher than maybe you would otherwise.
Dude, that's insane. So there might be some people that are like, "Oh man, they're hyping up all the stuff that Matt does outside of triathlon," and not the case, man. You've got a lot going on. And what's the timeline for you? And is it actually possible for you to continue to try to do what you're doing in triathlon and maintain this path to being a surgeon that you want to be? Like, what's the timeline on that?
Yeah. So, this is a great question because, and I'm gonna kind of talk about it on social media like soon, is that
Sweet.
medical school in the US is normally 4 years. And no, at least at Ohio State where I go, your first 2 years are kind of more lecture based, and you'll do some clinical work. You'll see patients a little bit, but not really. But you're pretty much just like expected to learn the material and then do well on the test. So you have a lot of flexibility with your time. And then third year is when you get into the hospital. And that's when like you lose pretty much all autonomy for your time. Like you're expected to be in the
Right.
hospital from you know, 7 to 5 or 5 to 5, something like that. And so it no longer becomes like, oh, you can sneak away, between two classes and do a workout or something.
Yeah.
Like you're there the whole day. And so, and then fourth year is a combination of a bunch of things. But to answer your question, I've ended up taking 2 additional years, so it'll take me 6 years to do medical school in total, and that's been predominantly so that I can focus on this research stuff a lot more.
Right.
And that time, like I'm in a research block right now, also gives me the flexibility to race because like when I'm in clinical rotations, I was in clinical rotations from January to May, like basically January 1 to Texas. You get like basically a day of vacation per month plus like weekends. And so it's really hard
Right.
to travel and race during that time. And so, like, but this research time gives me the flexibility to go on the cruise, to go to Australia for for 10 days, because I can do my research pretty much anywhere in the world right now. So,
Right.
long story short is that I still have about a year and a half of school total left. I'll graduate in May of 2027, and I honestly can't really tell you exactly how things are going to look in the future, because each kind of stage that you go through in medical school is totally different and has
Right.
totally different requirements. And truthfully, like January to April of this year was another one of those big like change points where it was like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go. And truthfully, like the training went way better than I ever expected it to go, considering that like I was getting less than the ideal amount of sleep, and I was on my feet all day. Like
Right.
I was literally doing everything about recovery wrong,
Not
but I
supposed
was
to.
still getting better.
Yeah.
And so like, even for me, these past couple of months have been like, wow, like there's a lot more that's possible than what I ever thought. And so, um, I don't really know. I don't really know what the future holds. We just kind of will figure it out as we go.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy. And it's so crazy that you're able to balance those times where, yeah, I mean, literally get off your feet as soon as you're done training and sleep as much as possible are, the keys to recovering and being a good athlete. And
Right.
somehow you're able to do that outside of that. That's nuts. And do
Yeah.
you ever
Which
have like
also,
a
which
period
also,
of, go ahead. Yeah.
go ahead. I was just gonna say, which made me a lot more confident, like on the cruise, honestly. Like I had multiple months where I was averaging like 5.5 to 6 hours of sleep per night. Um,
Nuts.
and like obviously that's not good. I'm not gonna pretend and say, oh, it's fine. Like every single piece of scientific literature says that's
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
But like I was training really well and I was staying healthy, and like there was no signs that I was necessarily like having significant negative impacts from it, except for that I was tired. So,
Right.
um, so like it just taught me that like, hey, like there's a lot more that's possible than what you think. And like that things don't have to be perfect in order to make them work.
That's awesome. And that's going to be something I'm sure that you'll need to remember when you're past all this triathlon stuff and you're cancer surgeon. I think most people in that position get burnt out, have a hard time. It's a crazy job, but I think
Mhm.
it seems like you're going to be able to handle that. Okay. All
Yeah, I
perspective.
mean there certainly will be periods of time like that will periods of time that will be harder than others, and um but yeah, I certainly think kind of the lessons that I've learned by doing both triathlon and medical school will carry me like pretty far. So
That's awesome. Well, dude, can't thank you enough for coming on after that uh, debut Ironman win. I was stoked to be a small part of covering that. And dude, many more to come. Maybe in Placid in 4.5 weeks.
yeah, yeah, hopefully we'll Placid will go well without cramps. That's kind of the main goal, and then we'll just go from there. So you'll have a sense of how the race is going to play out within the first hour.
That's awesome. Love it. Awesome, dude. Thanks so much, and appreciate the time is valuable for you, so we appreciate you taking it to talk to us.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate you inviting me to come on.
Thanks so much to Matthew for coming on the podcast. Dude doesn't have too much spare time. Obviously, he's got a lot going on, so appreciate his time coming. And yeah, dude's doing a bunch of crazy stuff. It's awesome. To stay across the latest in the Ironman and Ironman Pro Series news, follow at Ironman Try on Instagram and check out proseries.ironman.com for standings, athlete bios, episodes of A Fighting Chance, replays of all the races, and more. And of course, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Morton, the official sports performance nutrition partner of the Ironman Global Series. All Ironman athletes have access to Morton hydrogels and solids out on course in 2025. And big thanks to them. Couldn't do this podcast without them. And if you like this conversation, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you're on the trainer, you can watch the podcast on the Ironman Triathlon YouTube channel. Thanks so much for joining us on the Ironman Insider podcast presented by Morton. Be sure to keep an eye on the space as the Pro Series develops more into the season. Frankfurt next week, definitely going to have some shakeups there, but a bunch of good action coming. So come back to this space and we'll have more good conversations with great athletes as they continue their Ironman journey. I'm your host, Matt Lieto. Thanks so much for listening in.